for the Empire's well-being, even once he had passed. Ravon shook his head. It had been the perfect plan, and it was truly a great pity that his own actions had been his undoing. He entered the throne room, and one of his helpers handed him his cane. It looked a little like a scepter, and bore his family's seal. While he carried it, however, he was not allowed within the same 20 paces that the armed guards had to respect. Still, it helped him to walk, especially on the bad days. A young man already stood in the throne room, waiting for the Emperor to arrive. The Viceroy wished he could say that the boy wasn't his sovereign's bastard, but the appearance was too distinctive. Revar was at least 60 years his senior, but due to the power of magic, he recalled what the man had looked like when he was still young and vital. He was the spitting image of the youth who waited there now. A spell was not needed to tell him that this lad was one of the hundreds of bastards who had sprung from the old Emperor's loins, but it was still required for the ceremony, just to be sure. "You don't have to do this, lad," he whispered as he approached. "You can continue the life of luxury your father provided for you, no matter whether he openly accepts you as his heir or not. Some old witch's incantation will do nothing to change your life for the better, but could make it more difficult." Tall and statuesque, the young man certainly looked impressive. His long black hair rolled over his shoulders, and his muscles coiled under the robes that had been provided for him for the ceremony. Ravon had already seen his fighting abilities in person. He was the only 3-time champion in the Imperial arena, a feat completed before he was even old enough to have a beard growing from his chin. Of course, this was in the Emperor's tournament, which was the nightly counterpart to the actual combat-based Emperor's Championship. The young man had therefore excelled at the courtly version, but had no real fighting experience where he might have to face more than one bloodthirsty and aggressive opponent. That record had stood for almost 800 years before a dwarf named Yaragrim had taken the prize and held it for almost a decade. "It is my destiny," the boy whispered and nodded firmly. "Proclaimed by the gods and confirmed by all the signs. I must partake in the tests. It is my birthright." "Old rituals and laws hold no place in a modern world, boy," the Viceroy snapped. "You must see that. Your presence will only disrupt the peace that has lasted decades." "Then the peace will be disrupted. It is the will of the gods." He took a deep breath and calmed the quick, shallow beats of his heart. Too many had told him it would be the death of him as a result of his love for red meat and wine. A year before, he would have accepted the end with open arms. Old age did not suit him well. "How many will die because you can't live in peace?" The boy turned to him and opened his mouth to reply, but no answer seemed forthcoming. He merely shrugged before he turned to face the throne again. "It is my destiny," he repeated. "It is my birthright. The gods have willed it." Someone had whispered those words in his ear, and enough times that he had begun to believe them. Ravon shook his head, but any further conversation was cut short when trumpets blared to draw their attention to the throne. Revar himself would make an appearance for the ceremony, which would only make it that much more official. A herald took his place at a podium as 2 young, petite women with curly black hair helped lead the man to his throne. The Emperor had a particular preference, and that would always be provided to him from all corners of the Empire. It made no difference that he had difficulty walking, and all his hair had turned white and had even begun to fall out in patches. He was almost 200 years old at this point, and there was a limit to what magic could do. The Viceroy had made sure that he would never live that long. He refused to live until his teeth began to fall out with his hair, and he could only move with the help of young, nubile women. Even the man's eyes were starting to cloud over, and the cataracts became more difficult for his mages to heal. The Emperor groaned softly and finally settled on the throne and relaxed against it. Once he was comfortable, he nodded slightly to the herald. "The test